wife tells me I'm too loud. So, and they're always right, right? So we want to thank you for coming to the birthday party today. And of course, it seems reasonable to start out with Pledge of Allegiance. After all, he was in World War II and fought, and things were not nice down there, really. So we stand, there's a flag in the back, approximately 48 stars, and hand over heart, unless you're a veteran, you can use the same clothes, you can salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And Nancy has a robust meeting today, as you can see. This originally was for my notes. Okay? So, and once I was given, then I'm not much better. So I want to turn it over to her because she knows.
I'll see you guys later. There's nothing perfect, especially me, okay? So I will start out apologizing for this. I left it at home on the dryer. Joe couldn't get it quickly because I couldn't get back home and come back and be there on time. But that was just the start. When I came here this morning, it was 9:45, and this portrait picture back here was on the ground because the glue and the moisture, it didn't adhere. So I had to pick it up, put it back down, try to clean the dirt off of it because we do have to kind of get dirty here, and respray it. And this time it's filled up with yardsticks and planks. I'm hoping it works because this is going to be a permanent display here. I'm sure you all recognize this gentleman behind me. He's bigger than life because he was bigger than life. He couldn't remember my name and I was always a museum lady, which is okay. So I don't have a problem with that, as long as everybody else knows my name and signs the check. I want to thank you for coming. It is extremely warm in here, and I'll apologize for that because we have 4 units in here that are new and are not working. So that's another thing to look at today. Then I prepared to show a DVD of pictures that I received from Cheryl. Her class reunion was here. And I couldn't get this to work, so I went and bought a new DVD player. And it still didn't work because I made a DVD for her class reunion. So I get ready, got the new DVD, and I got everything going. It's the monitor. So we need a new monitor. So we can all have a DVD of those pictures whenever we get this up and running. So I owe her 2 sets, one of her class reunion up here and the one of today. I don't think anything else can go wrong yet. I did forget to unlock the elevator door, so I had to stand down there. Is there anything else I forgot? Well, Joe will tell me if I forgot, okay?
Nancy, is the light blue on?
Yes.
We can't hear it. Let's be my ears.
Can you hear?
No, that's better.
I just didn't get close enough. Whoever follows me will have to hold it. So you didn't miss anything. Thank you for coming out in the weather. And bear with us as we try to celebrate Carroll's birthday. And I will tell you this, Patty, Leroy Good's daughter, called me yesterday and told me that Leroy had to be taken to the emergency room. He was dehydrated, but the doctor said there wasn't anything more they could do for him. So I think some of it he's missing hearing or having a conversation with Carroll every day, because those two men talk every day on the phone. So without any further ado, Joe Root, Veterans Affairs and our Vice President.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? There we go. Can you hear me now? I'd like to thank everyone for taking time out of their Saturday to come here today to honor Carroll Johnson. Carroll Johnson was a World War II veteran, which we don't have many of those left. So I feel it's important that we honor all servicemen, but especially the ones who have suffered so much during the kind of conflict that he served. So my first speaker today is going to be Lieutenant Colonel Travis Carroll in USNC, and he will be making some comments that I'm trying not to steal in his words because he always does such a fine job. After Lieutenant Colonel Kelly, we're going to have State Representative, our State Representative, Senator Brian Buchanan, and then Mayor Judy Sheets. So I will go ahead and turn the microphone over to Colonel Kelly.
First off, Nancy, I think you're being hard on yourself. This is great, and I'm sure Carroll would appreciate all of us showing up to honor him. I was once told showing up is 90% of everything, and we all showed up, we're here, and I'm sure Carroll would appreciate that, so don't be hard on yourself, Nancy. I used to always take pride in putting this uniform on, and I even bragged to my wife today, like, hey, look, it still fits. You know, it's 30 years and it fits, and I was proud of that until I spoke for Leroy Good's 100th birthday party right here on this stage, and he shows up for his birthday in his uniform. It's over 75 years old. So I felt less proud after that. But like Mr. Reed said, this is an amazing opportunity to honor an incredible hero. I had the opportunity to speak about Mr. Leroy Good, and I had to do a lot of research to find out what he did, you know, what units he served in, where he fought, etc. And I did the same thing with Mr. Johnson, except Mr. Johnson kept an incredible record of all his exploits, incredible detail. I don't know if he journaled or how he had the recall that he had, but the names and the dates and the places, they're pristine, they're perfect. And the interesting thing that I found is that it's in very much alignment with other Clinton County World War II vets. So our farm boys here in Clinton County, they all got drafted at the same time. They all went over at the same time, and they fought in a lot of the same places and endured a lot of the same hardships, which most of us don't even know anything about because they never spoke of that kind of thing. So that's why we're here today. I was asked to speak to that specific point, so that's what I'll try to do. I've spoken at a few Veterans Day events and things like that, and I don't generally get nervous for those. I get nervous for these kinds of things because I feel like there's no way to do a man like Carroll justice with my words. So I'll do my best, but this has more importance to me because they sacrificed so much and they did so much for us. So I'd also like to thank everybody for the opportunity to speak about our Clinton County hero, Carroll Johnson's military service. I'd also like to say to the family and friends of Mr. Johnson that I'm truly sorry for your loss. He was a great man and a friend to all who met him. My connection to Mr. Johnson goes back probably 40 years. My brother and I were close friends with Chad and Chris Hensley, who are here in the audience today. And we'd often go over to their adopted grandparents, Norma and Carroll's place, to hang out, ride four-wheelers, shoot guns, camp in the backyard, camp in the house. Norma and Carroll were always extremely kind to us, and I have a lot of fond memories of that. So that's another reason why I wanted to speak today. The connection there, as well as the connection with my grandfather, Sam Thompson, who was also a World War II vet. Both my grandfather didn't go overseas. He was in the Army during World War II, and they were very close friends. he, Leroy, and Carroll were all really close as they grew up here all at the same time. I have to say, these World War II vets, there's so few of them now, like Mr. Ruth said. So if you know any of them, and you have the opportunity to speak with them, I've been fortunate enough to speak with Leroy. I did get a chance to speak with Mr. Johnson, but those are memories that I'll take with me forever. And you really you can break them open and get them to talk. It's really an incredible thing. And again, there's not any left. There's just really so few left. They're truly the last of the breed, and it's the last of the greatest generation. So it's something that we should all try to glean something from. I think it's hard for most of us to imagine a war fought against a true existential threat. The kind of threat that, if not countered, your way of life will forever change or even cease to exist. We haven't fought that kind of war since World War II. Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam, Korea, those were not, in my opinion, those were not existential threats. Threats to the homeland that would truly alter your way of life in the near future. But that's what they faced. World War II is different. The war in Europe was big enough to begin to threaten our shores and all of our allies, and then certainly Pearl Harbor in the Pacific, you now had two fronts, two existential threats hitting from both sides, the European theater and the Pacific theater. So truly, you had to give up your sons and daughters. Your farmers had to leave their fields, through the crops in the fields, and go over and fight to ensure their way of life continued. And that's something that I haven't experienced. I was 22 years in the Marine Corps. I didn't experience that, and hardly anybody in this room, I don't think, experienced that. We're the offspring of the people that experienced that. So as a general footnote, just so you know where I got this information, Mr. Johnson's memoirs, like I said, they're truly amazing. In my opinion, they should be required reading for any Clinton County resident. If you've got a kid who's interested in a history project, or a grandson or granddaughter, get that document here at the museum. It's amazing. I read it from cover to cover. That's where I gleaned a lot of my information. And then we studied a lot of these battles. A lot of the battles that these men fought in are the case studies that our national war colleges review and analyze for how well they were conducted. So that tells you anything about where this man fought. These battles are now case studies at the Naval War College where I studied. The other cool thing about this document, his memoir, there's lots of little vignettes in there. He talks about, as they march up through Italy, he meets a family that stayed behind, and he had some popcorn that somebody had mailed to him. And he talked them into giving them some oil so he could pop the popcorn. And he talks about how they were scared of the popcorn. They'd never seen that before. And then how he left them seeds and told them to plant it in the spring so they could grow their own. If that's not a true farmer, I don't know what is. But there's all these little vignettes in there that are really interesting to read. And I will say he's extremely humble. He doesn't talk about the significance of the actual fighting, but you can kind of read between the lines and gather that it was hardship. It was truly difficult fighting, but you kind of have to read through the lines on that. Mr. Johnson was a farm boy in Frankfort with a nice crop in the fields when he received his draft notification on 27 July 1942. Imagine that. This is how you make your living. Your crop's in the field and suddenly you get drafted. But you're going to go because you know you have to. Not because the government tells you to, but because you want your family to maintain your way of life. Upon being sworn in, Mr. Johnson would go to Europe and fight for the next 3 years. 3 years of hard fighting. But my longest deployment was just shy of 9 months. And I thought I would never make it. And it was nothing like what this man had to do. You know, I got hot meals, hot showers every day. I was on an aircraft carrier. Easy duty. This was truly difficult, arduous conditions in 3 years of fighting. Mr. Johnson was assigned to the 141st Artillery Battalion, Field Artillery Battalion. It's a well-storied battalion, tracing its roots back to 1838, and it's still in operation today as part of the Louisiana National Guard. After training in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, the 141st sailed aboard the James Parker troop ship to North Africa with over 2,000 U.S. troops aboard. They traveled all the way across the ocean with the threat of German U-boats, submarines, always at the front of their minds. These are farm kids, probably never left Indiana. He may have never even been to Indianapolis, I don't know, but probably not been out of Indiana. And he's now traveling over to Africa with a bunch of guys he doesn't know, knowing that they're going to war and some of them won't come home. Just imagine what that's like. Cramped quarters, horrible food, rough seas, threat of German U-boats, and you're going over to fight. That's what these guys did. Once they traveled across the ocean, they landed in Oran on the northwest side of North Africa. And 141st began training in order to keep ready for fighting that was sure to come. Carroll mentions an incident in his memoirs I found funny. He spoke about two small Allied Piper Cub planes. They used to have a Cub. Had two planes that were following his unit one day as they made training maneuvers across the desert of North Africa. The one Cub clipped a tree and crashed. And then the second Cub came over to check out what was going on. He hit the same tree and crashed. And, Carroll witnessed this whole thing. It didn't speak well to pilots, so I took that a little bit to heart. It said it was the only tree for miles in the middle of this desert. So the only tree for miles, leave it to a couple pilots to find the tree and to hit the tree. But those are those little stories. So I recommend, again, reading it. It's really extremely interesting stuff. From North Africa, specifically the port of Bizerta, the 141st boarded amphibious landing craft to make its landing on the Italian peninsula, making its landing in Bagnoli, just south of Naples. An enemy-contested combat amphibious landing. If you've seen Saving Private Ryan, if you've seen any of those D-Day movies, that's what it is. An amphibious landing contested by the enemy. Extremely tough thing to do. It's incredible to think that Carroll Johnson, our Clinton County hero, did that. 10 days after arriving, they were fighting up through Italy, going through Venafro, through the mountains, and Carroll mentioned on a moonless night exchanging fire with the Germans. They received fire from big German artillery guns and then aircraft bombers above. He could see the aircraft dropping bombs on them while he was on the Italian peninsula. The kind of thing movies are made of. The terrain was brutal, and they even used burros to help carry equipment through the mountains. Not to mention the time of year, this is the winter of 1943 to 1944. Brutal cold weather up in the high country on the Italian peninsula. After months of continuous fighting, the 141st was pulled back to Naples to board ships once again for another amphibious landing in Anzio. So you've already made one amphibious landing contested by the enemy, and now you're being asked to board ships again, and let's go do it again. He ends up doing it 3 times during his time overseas. So Anzio, if anybody knows anything about Anzio, we studied this in the Naval War College. It was a brutal battle. It's a marshland, so you're coming ashore, which is difficult in itself, and now it's an extremely marshy area, low-lying terrain, hard for tracked vehicles to move through, hard for people to move through. Enemy artillery is set up in multiple positions, and the thing with Anzio is it relied upon the element of surprise. And they did that. They largely arrived undetected and had the element of surprise. This is something that they study a lot. General Clark was the commander of the 5th Army, 4-star General Clark. He knew this, that they needed surprise. His subordinate, Major General Lucas, felt like they needed to, once they came ashore, regroup and prepare for counterattack. What they needed to do was come ashore and push as far as they could. They didn't. They came ashore, they paused, they regrouped, and that allowed the German offensive actually, to come in, place gun positions, and start pounding them on the beachhead. So that part of the operation was deemed a failure. So you had a successful surprise, and then the follow-on operation was deemed a failure. Major General John Lucas was the lead and was sent home. So this was a significant battle in World War II. Mr. Johnson speaks about being hammered by these large German railguns. These German railguns, there were 2 of them. One of them was called, they nicknamed Anzio Express, and the other one was Anzio Annie. And these were huge guns, 200-ton guns on a rail car, over 90 feet in length. They could shoot a 500-pound projectile, explosive projectile, at 3,600 feet per second, over 35 miles. The fastest rifle that I have just barely hits 3,600 feet per second. This is a 500-pound munition, and they got pounded by this. So Imagine you come ashore, swampy terrain, and now you're getting hit with these big guns. They were on that beachhead for 4 months. They spent 4 months on Anzio and got pounded. They suffered 43,000 casualties. In Iraq and Afghanistan over a period of 20 years, you're talking 6,000 casualties. That's what they suffered there on Anzio. And Carroll hardly mentions it. I mean, he talks about Anzio, but he doesn't talk about how bad that must have been. Overhead, Mr. Johnson would see aircraft shot down right in front of him. Enemy aircraft and friendly aircraft, he would see it get shot down. They themselves had anti-aircraft artillery that they would use to shoot down enemy aircraft. Our hero, Carroll Johnson, from Old County, he did that. He was there doing that, which is just amazing. Straight from Mr. Johnson's memoir, he says, this is what he says about it. Anzio was a hot place, and the sun didn't cause it. We would shoot at the enemy, and they would shoot back. We shot over 3,000 rounds a day several times. We had 12 guns, but one time we only had 4 working. At one time, the officers thought we might be driven back into the sea. All truck drivers were given TNT to be used to destroy our trucks and radios and anything else that the Germans could use. That's all he says about it. Just a real humble statement of, yeah, it was so bad, we thought we were going to get driven back to the sea and blow up all of our gear so the Germans wouldn't get it. That's how bad it was. While he's on the beachhead, he sees 4 of his friends. He sees Leroy Good, Jim Stinson, Ralph Bartholomew, and Erlen Rothenberger. 4 guys from Cook County, all farmers, and they're right there on the Anzio beachhead with them. So that kind of got me to thinking, when we have something like that, when we call our sons and daughters to battle, it's your average Joe farm kids like these guys. They go do our nation's bid, and they did it. They did it superbly, and we're all here, on a beautiful sunny day because they did this. During the breakout from Anzio beachhead, the 141st fired 14,991 rounds in 5 days. In total, Mr. Johnson spent 4 months on the beach. Next up was Rome. While passing through Rome, Mr. Johnson spoke of how the people of Rome would flow flowers at them and try to kiss them. He talked about how it made him feel good to have helped in some small way. That they were thankful. It made him feel good to help in some small way. Some small way. 4 months on the Anzio beachhead, getting pounded by big guns. And now you're up in Rome and you feel like, I sort of helped these people out. No, you saved their lives. You didn't sort of help them out. The unit traveled back to Naples once again, to board ships again, and on 11 August 1944, they set sail for southern France. On D-Day, 15 August 1944, they made yet another landing on St. Maxime Beach. St. Maxime was at the center of Operation Dragoon, which was the invasion and liberation of southern France. All part of D-Day, right? You go back to the movies, that's all part of that planned invasion. Carroll Johnson, once again, 3rd amphibious landing in southern France. Contested amphibious landing. Once again, Carroll right in the middle of making history. The 141st moved on to Montmartre to stop the German 19th Army as they moved north up the Rhine River Valley, all over the Rhine River Valley. Mr. Johnson describes heavy fighting. This is the one place in his memoir where he talks about some heavy fighting. That tells me that it was really heavy fighting. As humble as he was, and as reserved as he was, I think this is where, in my opinion, after reading it, this is where he saw some extremely heavy fighting. His memoir is very reserved, he's extremely humble, he limits his discussions on actual fighting, but you can tell there was heavy fighting here. I can only imagine how tough it would have been. Mr. Johnson spoke of Christmas 1944 at a rest camp outside Chalon, France, at a large castle chateau, where he got a hot bath and clean clothes. It sounds like that's the first time, and I don't know how long he got a hot bath and clean clothes. I haven't understood that. 141st continued to push the Germans back, and they made mountainous crossings, eventually clearing the Colmar area and the German Siegfried Line. The Siegfried Line is another notorious checkpoint along the way to success in the European theater that was studied at the War College. Heavy fighting under arduous conditions and significant loss of life to both American and the Germans. This was a significant loss to the Germans. This was all over. This was the end for them when they lost it. All Carroll really said is, we did a lot of shooting in that area. Quote, we did a lot of shooting in that area. Again, humble words that come to mind. Something I also noted with Mr. Leawood did. Mr. Leawood did. We talked about, I met him on the 75th anniversary of D-Day at a party, and all he says to me, war, that's tough stuff. And he turns around and walks away. That's all he said, war's tough stuff. That's what these gentlemen will like. That's why you can go talk to them. Go talk to them. All these men were exceptional in so many ways. It's why I continue to refer to them as the last of the breed. They just don't make it like that. On Easter Sunday, 1945, Carroll Johnson and the 141st crossed the Rhine River into Germany. Now it's official. They're in Germany. They crossed the Rhine. Upon coming in, they were strafed by two Me-262 Messerschmitts, the first jet aircraft ever made, which I find historically significant. They got strafed by two jets. No one had ever even seen jets before. They had never seen them before. They had heard about them. His unit was strafed by them. Thank God the Germans didn't get the jet until the end of the war. Otherwise, it would have been a game changer. Shortly before the war ended, Mr. Johnson went to Marseille, France, where he was to be a guard on a prison ship with German prisoners of war. The war ended, however, and they unloaded the Germans and they all sailed home. Regarding the trip home, Mr. Johnson said, "The weather was great, the water calm, the war in Europe was over, and I was on my way back home to the States. What else could you ask for?" So, he just fought for 3 years, left his farm, crop in the field, lost countless friends, endured unspeakable hardships, yet he's positive, upbeat, and that's what he says. I'm on my way home. At the beginning of his memoir, Carroll said he passed the Statue of Liberty leaving the harbor in New York. You could tell in his writings that it had significant meaning to him. You got to remember, he's not that many generations away from coming from, I don't know where he came from, probably, definitely Europe, but I'm guessing North Europe, England, Scotland, Ireland, that's where my people came from. So they know the Statue of Liberty has different meanings to them than it does to me, I think. I just quite be honest, I think it does. So they passed the Statue of Liberty. He talks about it in his memoir. On his return from war, he passes right through the same harbor and passes the Statue of Liberty once again. And he said in his memoirs, he says, he had wondered when he left if and when he would ever see the Statue of Liberty again. That puts it all in that mindset. Oh my gosh, these guys, when they left, they didn't know if they were coming home, and they didn't know what they were coming home to. They didn't know if the Japanese were going to make a landing on the coast of California and sweep inland. They had no idea. But that's what they were going off to do. Literally wondered if there'd be a home to come back to. Our greatest generation ensured that they had homes to come back to. They made sure that their kids, which were my generation's parents, most of you in the audience right there, that you had lives to come back to. You had homes, you had farms, you got to go to church, you got to live in this nice area under freedom. You got to grow up in the 50s and 60s and 70s under prosperous times. They made sure that happened. Pretty heroic stuff, if you ask me. I, for one, am very thankful for Carroll Johnson and Leroy Goods and all our World War II vets. I'm very thankful for what our Clinton County boys did, and I'm proud to have known such great men. Thank you for letting me speak today. Again, I can't do it justice. I can't cover everything in that memoir. I get a chance to look at it. But truly great men that did truly great things, and it gives you pause to think, will we do that again? Do we have the stuff to make that happen again? I think we do, but it's something we always have to keep our mind on. So, thank you for your time. I really appreciate your understanding.
Boy, that'd be hard to follow. That was tremendous. The only thing I'd like to comment is, I know you kind of left one thing out about piles in the creeks. You have to remember, we have Marine Corps pilots here, and those are Army trained pilots. And we have Army veterans out there. Trying to tell you what it's doing. Next, I'd like to introduce our State Senator, District 7, Ryan Buchanan.
Thank you, Mr. Root. Appreciate the opportunity to be here with you and join in this celebration. And yes, thank you for your reflection of Mr. Johnson's service. It truly is amazing. Again, thanks for having me. Celebration, this recognition of Carroll Johnson. And he was a true American hero who risked everything to protect our country and the many freedoms that we now enjoy. And that's mentioned of the World War II generation. We often refer to it as the greatest generation. And I think that's certainly true. If you look at the greatest generation of what they had to endure, just that generation of everything from the Great Depression to one of the most significant wars, if not the most significant war this country has ever faced. It's just truly amazing how that generation dealt with it. And in regards to World War II veterans, in preparation and thinking about coming here today, last evening I wanted to look up the numbers on World War II veterans and how many of them served and how many of them are still alive. And as Mr. Kelly said, I would encourage you, if you still have a relationship or contact with the World War II veterans, reach out with them and talk with them, because the numbers I found last evening, just with a quick search on Google, was 16 million Americans served in World War II, and just about 100,000 are still alive today. So it's not very many, and if you have an opportunity to reach out to one and talk with one, I'm sure this will be fascinating to learn and gain their perspective and their outlook. And it was amazing at the end of his speech right here how just fought for 3 years on his way home on the boat, and just hey, I made it. The seas are calm, and I'm going home. It makes us all really appreciate, be thankful for what we really have. I truly believe America is the beacon of hope and the defender of all that is good in our world. That has never been more evident than in World War II, when people just completely upended their lives, just like Mr. Johnson did, when there was an evil dictator threatened to take over, wanted to take over, and was on track to take over the entire world if someone doesn't stop him. And that's when the United States engaged in the battle, and millions of Americans, just like Mr. Johnson, Mr. Good, stepped up and said, hey, I'm willing to fight, I'm willing to try to save our freedoms. And eventually, we're talking about our freedoms, the freedoms we enjoy right here in the United States. We all probably need to reflect. I know myself personally, just reflect on how fortunate we are as Americans. We live in a country where you can be anything you want to be. Any dream you want to dream can come true. You can worship freely, peacefully protest the decisions of our leaders. We have the right to speak freely without punishment or imprisonment. We have the right to bear arms and the right to move about freely without government intervention. Those were the very things that Mr. Johnson was fighting for. And I think we've always got to be mindful of that, and we're very fortunate here in America. Carroll Johnson went to battle to protect the many freedoms that we now enjoy. And in this busy world, this hustle bustle, we're fortunate and lucky as Americans. Sometimes we just need to step back and realize that freedom isn't free. We have to be constantly guarding it with diligence and might. And it's happened in World War II and many times since. There's evil in this world that would like nothing more than to see America and our freedoms and our prosperity and the dream, the vision, the idea of America gone forever. Unfortunately, since the start of our great country, we're so lucky for people like Mr. Johnson, Mr. Good, Mr. Kelly up here, Mr. Root, who have stepped up and served our country to simply protect our freedoms and risk everything to protect those freedoms. Ronald Reagan might have said it best, and I looked up a few quotes from him. Ronald Reagan just sometimes had a good way with words and put it best, and he said, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children or our bloodstream. It must be fought, protected, and handed on to do the same, or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in the United States where men were free. And I think that really sums up how it's important for us to all be diligent and aware, and that quote there really puts it in context for me. Again, Mr. Johnson, a great man, and before this, I was talking to some people and just looking up, trying to learn a little more about Mr. Johnson, and And I came across when I was looking at the greatest generation, just typed it in and seeing what it said. And it brought up 7 characteristics. And I think all of these, from my understanding, reflect Mr. Johnson perfectly, from my understanding. And this, type in Google, what is the greatest generation? And patriotism was at the top. Patriotism, personal responsibility, a strong work ethic, which I think we all would agree with that the World War II generation, integrity, a faithful commitment, and humility. And I think that truly sums up the generation in the service of Mr. Johnson greatly. So, Mr. Root, thank you for having me. Appreciate being here, and thank you guys.
Next, I have the honor of introducing the mayor of the city of Frankfort, Judy Sheets.
Thank you, Joe. As I was getting ready, I had to prepare this statement for today. I really didn't know Carroll Johnson very well. I knew he was related to Mike Hensley and his family. So I have some interesting facts that I found out about him, and you probably already know it. I thought it was very interesting. He attended the Ward School on Warner and North Gentry. I didn't even know he had a school in Frankfort called the Ward School. He also attended the First Presbyterian Church. First Presbyterian Church, and he joined it in 1933. He was a decorated veteran of World War II, serving in Africa and Italy. And he wrote books, which I was not aware of that. It said he wrote books about his love for 4-H, Boy Scouting, and his military service. He was a 2016 Clinton County Gem, and he had strong faith, loved his family, loved his friends. And also, one thing that I think is really exciting is this is where he graduated high school. It was at Old Stoney, and I think it's right there today to celebrate his life and to honor him. On behalf of the city of Frankfort and myself, we would like to honor Carroll Johnson for his love and dedication to this community. He was born and raised on the farm that he worked so hard on his entire life. We're thankful for the books Carroll wrote to preserve the history of his experiences growing up in Clinton County. Carroll had a strong faith, love for his family and his friends, love for his city, his state, and his country. We were honored to know him. Carroll Johnson was a blessing to many. He was loved beyond words and was beyond measure. And I will just finish with saying that my prayer for all of you is that you find comfort in the fact that he made great memories. Carroll, we touched so many lives, and we have love for each and every one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Sheets, and thank you for the work of God. I would like to make one comment about Mr. Johnson. Whenever I would have an event to honor veterans, I could always depend on Carroll Johnson standing in the back, quietly being there, and him and Lee were good, they're like magnets, it seems to always find them together. So, next, I'd like to move forward with readings by Julie Newhouse.
Close enough to the courthouse to hear its clock ring out the hours.
That was if the wind was out of the south. The clock no longer rings. School started in September after Labor Day. To start then, you had to be 6 years old. You started in 1B grade. If your birthday was in September or later, you had to wait till January to start. For those who started in September, past the first semester, they were promoted to grade 1A class in January. Both classes were taught by the same teacher. This method of grading was used through all 7 grades held in the grade schools. If you were in the 1B class and the teacher was teaching the 1A class, and you paid attention to what was being taught, it was a big help with your studies. Some double promotions took place. Frankfort schools had 9 months school year. The county schools had 8 months because let the farm boys help with the spring planting. Frankfort was divided into 4 grade school areas. The railroad divided the town from north to south and east to west. A grade school was built in each section so that most of the students didn't have to cross any railroad to get into school. Frankfort was really a railroad town. The early schools were named for the voting boards they were located in. I started my schooling at First Ward. The school building was the second building in that location. The first school had been destroyed by fire in 1884. It was located in the north part of Frankfort, the northeast corner of Varner and North Henry Street. First Ward School was a 2-story brick building with a basement. It had oil wooden floors and stairs. It did not have a gym or cafeteria. The toilets were located in the basement. Large playgrounds were located on the north and south sides of the school. First 4 grades used the south side playground. It was composed of cast iron fans about 4 feet tall, and helping keep any students from getting on the street. An interurban passenger car ran down the middle of the street. Julia Knapp rode it to her school each day as she lived out west Frankfort and Washington. The south side playground also had a large sandbox area, which was good for building castles. Teachers were always there to keep things under control. Tag, hopscotch, and jumping the rope were some of the games we played. If the weather was nice, the first 4 grades had a recess in the middle of the afternoon. The playground on the north side had a basketball hoop where you could practice your skills with basketball. Other games the older boys played were shooting marbles, spinning tops, running races, playing tag, and playing catch with the football. Sometimes the girls would join in, and sometimes they would listen up. After all, they were out in 13 years old. My teachers at First Ward were starting with the first grade were Miss Seabar, Miss Holloway, Miss Rose, Miss Pearson, Miss Clayton, Miss Morrison, Miss Gunyon, Miss Bueller, and D.F. Pittman. O.J. Green was our principal. He was a very sharp dresser with white hair. He kept a paddle in his office. I never did see him use it. I did hear it being used. The lady teachers were never married. One day, each week, Miss Campbell came to First Ward for gym classes, and Miss Nixon came for music classes. They both served all 4 grade schools. The dress of the day for girls in grade school were dresses below the knee, and for the boys, big overalls or knicker pants with stockings up to your knees. Once in a while, when it was warm enough, some boys would come to school barefoot. With me living out in the township, I got to ride a school bus. My Uncle Clarence Tompkins was my bus driver all 12 years. His first bus was a 27 Chevy. It had a 4-cylinder motor and single wooden spoke wheels all around. You sat facing the center of the bus. The bus would hold around 20 students. The only heater was the exhaust pipe that came up from the floor behind the driver's seat of the bus, and the length of the bus, and exited back down to the floor at the rear. It had an eavesdrop over it to keep you from burning your shoe soles with you. There were only 2 school buses used to pick up the county students in Center Township. One for the east half of the township and one for the west township. I wonder how many buses are being used today. If the roads were bad or slick, chains were always used on the rear wheels. The windshield wipers were not power driven, and if they were needed, one of the older riders on the bus would help out the driver and work the windshield wipers for him. Somebody else will read some more.
Keep in mind that these are Carroll's words. He wrote them himself. The school bus stopped at all railroad crossings. We had 3 different railroads to cross. At each crossing, the driver would stop, and one of the older boys on the bus would leave the bus, go to the center of the tracks, and check for trains each way. If the tracks were clear, he would motion to the bus driver to move forward. He would do so slowly and pick up the boy almost on the go. His first stop was the first ward, where the first 7th grade students got off. Then he would go on to the junior high and the high school for the older students. In the evening, he would reverse the route. School started at 8:10 in the morning and let out at 10 till 4 in the evening. If you were late getting to school because of bus trouble, you were never considered tardy. One winter, the buses did not run for almost a week. Our neighbor, Ray Johnson, took his bobsled out of storage, which was pulled by horses, and took the students on our road to school. We were the envy of all the city students who had to walk to school. That was true horsepower at its best. Horses were also used by the city to clean the sidewalks for those who had to walk to work or walk to school. About all the sidewalks got covered with more snow by the street department when they were cleaning the streets for the cars. About all the students that rode the school bus carried their dinner box. The boys and girls each had a room in the basement of our school after lunch. Usually some of our teachers would eat like breakfast. My older sister got the job of fixing our school lunchtime. We had lots of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, sometimes fried beef sandwiches. If we had fried chicken for dinner on Sunday at home, we would put some aside for our lunch buckets on Monday. Sausage, ham, and side meat was used during the winter months when we were butchering. Sometimes we had a hard-boiled egg, apple, peach, or maybe a piece of pie. Oh yes, I almost forgot that banana. A neighbor boy, Bob Hufford, who rode on our bus, also carried his lunch. He had hot dog sandwiches about every day. Sometimes we would swap sandwiches. Hot dogs were never on my menu. Across the street from first floor was a small restaurant run by Faye Calvin. His thumb was missing on his right hand. That did not slow him down when it came to making burgers. His burgers were 5 cents. On the last day of school, in late May, was a no dinner bucket day. We got to buy our dinner at Faye's restaurant. Our parents thought we were hand snow when we cleaned out our desk and brought the contents home. That building still has a restaurant in it today in 2014. There was the highest grocery store next to the restaurant. If you had a nickel, or maybe you had 5 pennies, you could get an Eskimo pie ice cream bar. If you got a pink one, you got a free one. Blood orange pop was 5 cents. Once we got promoted to be in the 6th grade, with our teacher's permission, we could walk downtown at noon. It was only about a 5-block walk. We would do this during our noon break. We always had good reason we needed to go. In the spring of the year, it was kite building time, and we needed some kite sticks for the job. The Deming and Thompson lumber yard always had some kite sticks ready for us young kite builders. They never charged us for it. Another stop we always made was at the Royal Garment Cleaners for ink blotters. The ink pens we were using had to be dipped into the ink well that sat in a small hole in the top right corner of your desk. You could write until the pen ran dry. Then you had to use the ink blotter to keep from smearing the ink. Sometimes, if you had failed to put the cap back on the ink bottle, and a girl with long hair sat in front of you, her hair might accidentally get in the ink bottle. Some things the teacher would let us help her with was to sharpen the red pencil that the class was using, and take the blackboard erasers outside and clean them. Most classrooms in the grade school had 2 walls covered with blackboards. They were always in constant use by the teacher. Another reason for a trip to downtown was to check the used cardboard boxes in the alleys behind the stores for used postage stamps. In 1934, we got our first radio. It was run by a 6-volt car battery, as we did not have electricity. We did not leave the radio on all day. On Saturday, Captain Tim was on advertising for ivory soap. You could save your ivory soap wrappers, send them to Captain Tim. He would then send you some used postage stamps. I still say use postage stamps today in 2014, and he still did it in 2021. At first ward, Miss Gunyon was our math teacher for grades 6 and 7. On Friday afternoon, if we had a good week in her classes, we would have ciphering matches during the last day of class of the day. One person from the 7A class and one person from the 7B class would go to the blackboard and do the math questions that Miss Gunyon would give them. The one that finished it first and was correct got to stay at the blackboard and face another challenge. The problems could be addition, long division, subtraction, multiplication, and fractions. And the blackboard.
And I had the honor of calling Carroll Johnson my uncle. I have the next part of our story. Miss Gunyon was my favorite teacher in my grade school years. Why? Maybe it was that she was young and pretty to the eye and always had a smile. Or because I liked math and done well in it. The grade schools had 3 grading periods each semester. Your grades could be put on your grade card for 1 period at a time and finish again. We had to take them home for our parents to see how we were doing in school. Then they would sign them. We would take them back to school and give them back to our teacher. School books being used were good for several years. My sister was 2 years ahead of me. I was able to use her books through most of my grade school years. It saved a lot of money by not having to get new books every year. Also, you could get a jump on what you going to be studying later once you started using the books. Every fall, First Ward School would have a school fair where you could check your skills at various booths. There was always lots of food booths to teach your taste buds. If you liked to fish, you could check your skills. Teachers were always anxious to meet their students' parents. Later in the fall, a rag and paper drive would be held in the First Ward School area. The residents of that area would save their papers for a year just for the drive. The students, with some help from the teachers, would do most of the work. The money raised was used to help the needy students at First Ward with their books and clothes. Once the drive was over, we had to mail the rags and papers and deliver them to Lennox and Anderson Salvage Yard. Some other things that I remember from my school days at First Ward School was when I was in Miss Grove's 3rd grade class. Something upset her, so she kept some of the class after school. That made me miss my ride home on the school bus. After we got released, I went across the street to where my aunt and uncle lived to call home for a ride. While I was waiting for my ride to come, my Aunt Cora, who had been sick for some time, died while I was there. It is still very vivid to me. Another memory happened when I was in D.F. Pittman's class. It was on a Monday morning, and I had taken some popcorn to school. I had it in my desk and would speak with Rain now and then. Mr. Pittman caught me in the act. He did not say much, except that I should have brought enough for everyone. There was around 25 in my class. The next Monday, I had a very large bag of popcorn. Mr. Pittman lived up to the deal. We had a popcorn party. When I was in the 6th grade at First Ward, Teacher Good, who was our janitor, was in a bad car wreck. He had a broken arm and used a cane to get around. He offered me a job of helping him clean the building after school. I told my parents about the offer of a job, and they agreed to let me try it. The furnace was stoker fed. I had to keep the coal hopper filled in the morning and the last thing in the evening before I went home. We would sweep out some of the rooms at noon and try to finish the rest of the building in the evening. Mr. Beecher would spread the sweeping compound, and I would use the broom. The toilets were the last to be cleaned in the evening. I made enough to buy myself a new Montgomery Ward bicycle, $22.88. It was red with the balloon tires, a front carrier basket, a speedometer, a light on the front, a rear carrier, and a reflector on the rear. Riding it sure beat walking. I was in the Boy Scouts at that time. My new bike got me to the Boy Scout meetings. It was a 2-mile ride. I also used it to get my cycling merit badge. I rode to Delphi and back. It was a 50-mile trip and took 3.5 hours. Every spring, the 4 city grade schools would have a track meet. I had a classmate, Johnny Collins, who was really into it. He had spiked track shoes like the big boys used. I did not have track shoes, so I would run barefooted. I was used to being barefooted. In the tryouts at First Ward, we both made the team. The city event was held at the high school track field. It had a cinder field to run on. My classmate, Johnny Collins, and I ran in the 120-yard hurdles. There were 8 runners in the race, 2 from each school. I won. That really covered my suit, beating Johnny with his track shoes and running on a cinder track barefooted. We also ran in the half-mile relay race and won it as a team. Those races were my only connection with sports while in school. Living on a farm, I had regular jobs to do every evening. Spring was always a busy time on the farm. We were farming with horses. The fellow in the field had to make every minute count. You had to stop working the horses at 6 in the evening as they needed to rest, be fed, and watered. It had been a long day. In the evening, and the horses had finished eating, we would let them out of the barn. They would run to a pasture field nearby. Once there, they would pick up their heels, get down on the ground, and roll on their backs. They were free for the night. In the morning, we would open the field gate. The horses would run to the horse tank, get a drink, and go in the barn. They knew which stalls was theirs. They were ready for breakfast. They got their breakfast before we got ours.
When you were in grade school, pictures were taken every year of each class by the school. The candle that time was mounted on the tripod. Mr. Colbert would get the class in place to suit him. He would then go behind the camera, put the cloth over his head, and check if he could see everyone through the camera lens. If everything was in focus to suit him, he would put the film in the camera and get his flash tray. He would hold the flash tray out the camera, our smile, and fire the flash. A bright flash and a lot of smoke was the result. He usually took 3 pictures of each class to make sure he had one good picture. In the spring of 1935, the 7th grade got to take a road trip to Emery, where we got to visit the Indiana State Capitol building. The legislators were in session. We also got to check out the soldiers and ceremony. Several of the boys made it to the top of the monument and lead in the spirit. In the basement, we posted the names of all the servicemen from Indiana that served in World War I. I had 2 uncles, names, and a list. Uncle Glenn Culbertson and Uncle Clarence Johnson. When we graduated from 7th grade, the class put on a program for the school to watch. Lots of poems were recited, some short talks were given about their time in First Ward, and lots of whole class singing. The last song that we sang was "Slow Gently, Sweet Apple." I don't think that I have heard it sang again in the last 80 years. After completing 7 years in grade school, we are now ready to move to the junior high. It was located southeast of the city square on East Walnut Street. All 4 of the city grade schools that were graduating 7th graders there, where we were divided and given homerooms. My homeroom teacher was Miss Hutchins. She was also my music and art teacher. In my music class, I was introduced to sharps and flats. I think that means what key the music was written in. The only way I can remember them was a little phrase I put together. For the sharps, it was go, dig, and E, which gave me G-D-A-E. G was 1 sharp, D was 2 sharps, and so on. For the flats, it was fat boys eat apples, or F-B-E-A. I was never into music. Why do I remember? After completing 1 year in junior high, you're ready for high school. In the fall of 1935, I started my 4 years in high school. My dad told me that if I didn't smoke or drink through my high school days, he would give me a golden pocket watch for graduation. I got the watch, and it still runs today. It came from Ellis Jewelry, which was located on North Jackson Street and it cost $30. Pocket watches were in style in those days. The high school was located north, across the street from the junior high on East Walnut Street. The schools are connected by a tunnel, which was really used in rainy and bad winter weather. The main reason for the tunnel was that a state highway separated the school. Crossing guards were also used. In high school, we had 3 different buildings that we would use and sometimes had to cross the street. When I started high school, I chose agriculture as my major study. Mr. Lowell was my homeroom teacher as well as my agriculture teacher. 3 afternoons each week, I had agriculture all afternoon. During the planting and harvest seasons, if the weather was fit for working in the fields, I could go home and help Dad. Mr. Lowell always said you could learn faster by doing it than just listening to him talk. My Montgomery Ward bicycle came in handy for those trips home. Some of the jobs I got to help with were working ground with horses ahead of the corn plant. And in the fall, filling silos, chopping fodder, sowing wheat, and shucking corn by hand. Record keeping was really pushed by Mr. Lowell. Quote, if you don't have good records, you don't know how your farmer or farm is doing. In the classroom, we can test milk for butter fat, handle eggs, test soil for lime weeds, and test seed form for germination. We also got into calibration for livestock and trimming and spraying fruit trees. In the fall, Mr. Lowell would take our class out to a cornfield and show us what kind of corn stalk to select ears from to be used for seed next year. It had to be standing, look healthy, and have a nice size ear fully filled out on the tip. In the 1920s and 30s, Reed's Yellow Gem was the most popular variety of food corn being used. It was an open pollinated variety. Most everyone saved their own seed for next year's use. The winter of 1935 was very cold. If you had not selected your seed corn in the fall of 1935 and gotten it dried down before freezing weather set in, it probably didn't germinate right in the spring of 36. The $1,000 egg class kept the germinator busy all spring testing seed corn. I got a penny per ear in testing my native seed corn. The test we used was both the ragdoll method of testing different crops for germination. The seed being tested had to be in the germinator for 8 days and kept moist and warm. Every spring, a state 4-H club roundup was held at Purdue University. At the same time, a state poultry and egg judging contest was held. Robert Shearer, Aaron Osler, and I made up the team for FHS. Mr. Black was our coach. Our best placing in the state contest was 3rd. I was on the team all 4 of my years at FHS. Mr. Lowell was also my biology class teacher. Sometimes he would take the class outside the school and show us how to identify different trees by the shape of their leaves. We then had to select and identify them, turn them into below. The more correctly identified leaves we put in, the better your grade would be. During my senior year in high school, I was the boys' 4-H leader in Union Township. Every one of my egg class schools, we had 60 members up here, and was the largest 4-H group in the county. One of the other special classes I took was mechanical drawing. Jim Davis was my mechanical drawing teacher, and was in charge of ticket sales at the home basketball game. Mr. Davis asked if I could take tickets at the university ball game. I jumped at the chance, but that meant I got to see the gate straight. I am safe, but I learned basketball is the hottest school event every home game in the South. When I started my senior year, 1938, in high school, Dad let me get a Saturday job at the Boston Village. The job consisted of delivering worship around town with school, job, and band. If there was no delivery service, I helped out in the store, which was located on the west side of Frankfort Square. Most everything the grocery store came in big bags. Salt came in big wooden barrels. Dry beans came in 100-pound sacks. Flour was in 25-pound bags, and was made in Frankfort by the Sims Mill, located on the Northern Railroad track in North Columbia Street. If you had wheat, you could take it to Sims Mill and break it to flour. Then it was in big jugs. You told the clerk how much you want, and it would be weighed or measured out. You brought your own container to the dinner. The dry products were weighed out in the 5 or 10-pound packages ahead of time, which was part of my job. I also got some Mr. Boone after the store closed on Saturday evening. The meat came in whole quarters of beef. You told the butcher what you wanted, he was better off for you waited. Same was true of pork. There wasn't any pre-packaged meat. The bargain grocery ran a hospital truck throughout the town. They came once a month. You could trade your live chickens and eggs for groceries. When the spring work started on the farm, I had to quit on the city job. Some of the other teachers I had were Mr. Blake for woodshop, Mr. Blunk for metal shop, Miss May for math, Mr. Wood and Miss Knox for English, Mr. Hampton and Mr. Pickett for history, Mr. Boyle for chemistry, Miss Hutchins for music and art, Mr. Thomas was the band director. Under his supervision, the band won the state contest 3 times as the marching band. Jim Cheesley was the drummer. The band played at all home football and basketball games, and the school song was played when the team came out to start the game, again at halftime, and once again when the game was over. I had an old cowbell that I took to the game. It made a great sound when I rang it. Maybe it inspired the team to play hard when they were through. Last but not least, Mr. Erick Case was my physical ed teacher all my 4 years in high school. He was also the varsity basketball coach at Frankfort High School. Mr. Jimmy Ross. Over the years that I was in school, the Frankfort High School won 3 straight championships. 1929, 1936, and 1939. When the 29 team returned to Frankfort on late Saturday night after winning the state championship, they came on the interurban streetcar. It ran across the west side of the Frankfort Square where it stopped. When the team stepped off the interurban, they had strings of hot dogs draped around their necks. In 1929, when we bought hot dogs, Lena, they came in strings fastened end to end, never in a package. We used to stuff sausage and animal casings when we butchered. Once the team left the interurban, we climbed aboard a red ball delivery truck and were paraded around Frankfort Square. It was a wild time on Frankfort Square that night. Dad and I and on Sunday afternoon, a big party was held at Howard Hall. In 1936, Frankfort went wild again, and the hot dogs won their 3rd state championship. In the spring of '39, the Frankfort Hot Dogs won the state basketball championship for the 4th time, beating Frankfort 36-22 in the final game. It was played in Butler Fieldhouse in Indianapolis. Lots of the students rode in school buses to Indy to watch the game. I was there. Edward Case is still our team's coach. Two popular hangout places after school were the Campus Castle, located near the high school, and Roy's Drugstore, located on the south side of the square in downtown Frankfort. Several high school students worked at both places after school. Another popular place on Friday and Saturday evenings was the Carroll Inn. It was located south of Frankfort on State Road 39 near the airport. It was a drive-in restaurant and it had a dance floor where you could stick up your heels. A dime was all you needed to be involved. Mr. Lockwood was the owner and he ran a clean ship. It was enjoyed by the high school crowd. 78 RPM records finished the music, all you could take your own records to play. During the school year, several of the school clubs would sponsor some special events. Dances and skating parties and concerts. The dances would be held in the high school library. The library was also used as a study room where you went if you had a local class group. Don Chandler had a popular dance man made up of high school musicians. His theme song was Sophisticated Swing. His band made good music and was good for cheek-to-cheek dancing. The gala event of the final year at FHS was the junior senior prom. It was held in Howard Hall on the evening of May 19, 1939. The hall was decorated with colored streamers overhead and on the wall. Small tables with colored lights were in place around the edge of the dance floor. The lights were lowered and sweet music was played. Jitterbug dancing was the dance for some. Not me. Big band music was the music of the day. My date for the prom was Reba Lewis. On May 25, 1939, our commencement was held in Howard Hall. 167 students walked the halls of dear FHS one last night. Fred Cypher walked with me when we paraded in for our commencement. On a class went to Churchill State Park for our senior class picnic. So long to dear FHS, whose memories will always be with us. Bob Bowler was our class president all 4 years of high school. Harrison Michael and Bill Campbell, who are yellow. The girls are not yet young. Of all the different classes I had in high school, English was my hardest. I just didn't like it. I would never figure out how studying about Idaho and the Cable 2 never helped me in fun. Over the years since graduating in class of 1939, we've had lots of great class reunions. At our last reunion in 2005, we were down to 10, 8 to the 10. I still keep in touch with 5 classmates that are still with us. My school years were great years for me, and I made lots of lifelong friends. In fact, I married one in the class of 1940, married me back. And he had some words to a song called Blue and White, and also All Hail the Hero of Frankfort. And it reminds you of another song about school days, getting old, So reading and writing arithmetic and listening to the tune of the interesting. You, my queen and California, I wish your days were better flow. And wrote on my slate, I love you so. That's the real thing. 3 weeks after graduation, one of our classmates, Robert Miller, was killed by a one-armed passenger train at the crossing of the South End of France near the fairground. He was driving his Ford Model T touring car given to him by his parents for his graduation. After high school, I took a correspondence course at LaSalle University in Chicago on farm engineering and farm management. I farmed all my working life except for 3 years when I was in the Army during World War II. I still live on the shore today, 2015. One of the words good friend who went to church with me, and we always sat in the same pew. And I'm wearing a coat today, even though it's warm, because Carroll and I were always the only ones who would wear a coat to church in the summer. That tradition passed away. So now I guess it's the ladies. And one other thing about he and I both had a love for music. And he would call me every Saturday night and every Sunday night to remind me at 7 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the evening.
Thank you, Bill. I did have one question. Was he one of your math students?
No,
Thank you. Yes, Mark?
Normally, they don't need to call me up to tell everybody dismissed, but this has been a great time. I appreciate everybody taking the effort to come out on a hot day like this and sit up here and do some reminiscence. And you all seem to be enjoying it. I was watching and I didn't see anybody fidgeting. Nobody even got up to the bathroom, which is a testament. So there are refreshments out here.
Mark, sorry. Carroll Johnson.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll take all that back. We'll see if they fidget now.
I know, that's why I didn't even to read when I got here. I wanted to give a tribute to my dear uncle. I'm Gerald in Osler. Guy who, daughter Mary was Osler, and brothers Jerry and sister Jalen, and this is Jalen's daughter that was so great to help us out here today. And Uncle Carroll was just, my mom's brother, was born 2.5 years after my mom, and weighed 10 pounds, just amazing for Culbertson at that time. And then 6 years later, he had a cute little baby sister, Lena, and she had one daughter, Carl, who helped provide for this today and was not able to come, and was sad about that. But you've heard so much about Uncle Carroll and his life growing up on the farm, and just, he was just an inspiration to me, and I just learned so much from him about how to treat people, and he married my Aunt Mary just before he went to the service. And then while he was at the service, she had a brain tumor and became blind. And it was just so amazing the way that whole situation was handled, and the rest of her life. He basically just was super to her. She learned Braille. They would come to our house every Saturday night and play cards. She put Braille on the cards, and they played pinochle together, and it was just so amazing to see him interact with her. And then in the 50s, his grandparents died, which is right across from where my grandma lived, and so he tore down that house and built a house in where he and Emery lived for another 10 years. Her health was really bad after that, and so she died after they'd only been married for 25 years. And then he married Aunt Norma in 1967, and they were married for 42 years. But her health also failed. But he was her caregiver also. For many very kind, patient, never complaining guy that I truly admired. And he was so proud of himself when he called me. It was in December, the day that he lived to be the same age as his mom. She lived to be 99 years and 4 months. That was in December when he got to that age. And so he got to live longer than she did. And he just filled my life with great memories, and especially in the recent years that we talked so much on the phone. But he was always busy, and he loved people, and he liked to talk to people. As some of you know, we got phone calls from him regularly. As he also wanted to share his gardening produce and all of his collections, his stamps and his coins and his license plates and big tractors and little tractors and engines. And he was always busy on. We just had beautiful families of birds and bird houses that he made and gave to us. And so this let me close with one thing here. He wrote a poem, it's not a poem exactly, but when he was 93, he said, "My trip on this road started in August of 2021 at 2 a.m. on the farm in Frankfort, where I still live. It's been a long journey with lots of twists and things to see and do, like seeing the beauty of Mother Nature waking up after a long winter's nap. And now leaving my road and wandering through the woods where the sap buckets are hanging on the maple trees, collecting sap so it can be boiled into a sweet soup. All around me, wildflowers are doing their part in beautifying God's world. The bluebells, the violets, the jack-in-the-pulpits, the sweet williams, the buttercups, and the mayaples are all displaying their gorgeous colors. As I walk farther into my woods, I hear the calls of the geese and the weeping things flying back north, telling me they know that spring is on its way. The robins are all thinking the same as they're back in the yard, looking for a tasty treat and a place to build a nest for their home in summer. As I travel further on my road, the snow, winter snow now changes to rain showers, which help everything spring back to life. Sometimes after a bad storm, a beautiful rainbow will be hung in the eastern sky to show you this beauty and signify that tomorrow should start off good. A rainbow at night is a sailor's life. There is supposed to be a pot of gold where the rainbow touches the ground, but I look for it, but just a little find it. As I travel further on life's road, I see a mother hen out showing off the babies. If she finds something for them to eat, she will walk, and they come later. My road showed me the way to the great Atlantic Ocean, where I sail on a red ship for days and days. The ships take me to 2 continents, where I race ashore onto a sandy beach, and where strange languages are spoken. And we found out we did at 3 times. To cities that are completely destroyed by bridge bombings and where bridges over wide rivers are no longer there. The terrible wars are being fought, and men are fighting men. Now that the war is over, my road now, as we retrace the route that I have been almost 2 years earlier. Back in the U.S., my road is still in the U.S. The wonders of our great natural parks, Yellowstone and Old Stoney. Still doing its thing. The wild animals are running through. The beautiful waterfalls filling the valley with a fine mist. Traveling further to the mountain shore, where I saw an amazing work of man carving out a stone faces a great land. What talent some people in our world have. Continuing my road as I go back to the farm on my daily road. Tractors now have taken over the heavy farm work, and the farm horses are getting well reserved to us. Windmills are full of the water to the bottom of the house. It's still pure away in the pump and the ground. Mother Nature still has the dogs running her clothes and waiting. Now as I travel through the North Road, things are changing fast. My road is getting steeper, more narrow, and harder to travel. I have found a great deal and much sadness along the way. My family, true friends, and my Lord have been with me all the way. I was on the road again. Where will it be taking me? I'm going to lead back to my Lord and Savior to see that I've been home. And I want to thank all of you for me, especially for Nancy. Nancy has spent so much time in this get together and all of you different times on her mind. And it's so great. He knew that there was something, even if he wasn't here. And it was amazing. Everybody's dream that we should have their minds and dreams and then we pass on. That is a